Hi, and welcome to this month's edition of the Social Responsibility webcast here at the 3i International Institute for Innovation. My name is Nadine Riopel. Once again, every month that's my name, and it's not going to change. And my guest today is Ian Mathieson, a senior consultant at the Center for Race and Culture, CRC Consulting. And today we'll be talking about labor shortage. What labor shortage? Workplace diversity and inclusiveness. And Ian's a great person to talk to about this because he, as I said, is a senior consultant. He's worked with thousands of people, facilitated in all sectors, actually, government, NGO, private sector, on topics relating to diversity and inclusiveness. He has a master's in equity education. He studied international peace and conflict in Costa Rica, right?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. Hablamos en español.
Sí, todo.
Oh, we're going to do the whole thing in Spanish today. Won't that be fun? No, we're not. Calm down. It's okay. And he also has done civil military coordination and serves on the Alberta Hate Crimes Commission. So clearly someone with a lot of wisdom and background in these kinds of areas. So let's dive right into it. Oh, no, before we dive right into it, I have to have a quick housekeeping note. We do have interactivity on this webcast, and we do heartily invite you to participate by using the question and answer box on your screen. So if you're logged into the webcast, you can see me talking. There should be a question and answer box on your screen, and you should be able to pipe up whenever you like. We have had feedback in the past that people feel like they're interrupting their conversation, our conversation that is. But this is not the case. We welcome your questions, and they will come up on a screen here that I can see, and I'll work them in whenever it works for us. So don't have any qualms. Go right ahead with that. So, getting right into the topic. There is a problem out there, or there's a couple of problems that relate to this issue. One of the first things that you had mentioned to me when we have had conversations in the past about this is that the standard operating procedures of a lot of organizations are at odds with their mandate in terms of diversity and inclusiveness. Can you expand on that idea a little bit for us?
Yeah, a little bit of it depends on what sector you're working in, whether it's the private sector, public sector, social service sector. But many organizations have a broad mandate that is accessible to mainstream community members and individuals, citizens. And sometimes that can pose a challenge for accessing some of the more diverse members of our community. So,
by broad mandate, you mean they're trying to be all things to all people?
Be all things to all people, or they have what I might call an approach that is equal, treats everybody the same as similar individuals. When in reality, we know that there's quite a lot of diversity in the public. So it's a challenge for particularly larger organizations that are trying to serve bigger populations or market to bigger populations. But the idea behind this notion of trying to reach and be more accessible to diverse groups of people is that when you have that broad mandate, that equal view of things, that you miss people sometimes. And so there is a lot of challenges in terms of figuring out how to be inclusive, how to be equitable in your approach. But also, from the perspective of business, how do you reach those individuals that you haven't reached yet? And maybe there's something about your approach, about the way you run your business or the way you do business that isn't quite tapping into people's understanding of the world and how they see it. So that can be a challenge.
And this would have special relevance, I'm thinking, for government organizations that have an actual legal mandate. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. That's why I say it depends on what sector you're looking at. So for government, they're very interested in providing the best service to the most amount of people and reaching, in some cases, reaching the most vulnerable communities. So they have to pay a lot of attention in terms of how they're doing it equitably. The private sector, on the other hand, is looking to increase their market share or however you want to put it in business terms. They want more people to engage with their product, with their service. And so they're looking for ways to tap into communities that they haven't engaged with in the past.
And also in terms of, this is Alberta. I don't know if everyone watching today is in Alberta, but the people who are know that labor is a sort of a constant struggle for us, and this certainly has relevance to that.
Yeah, particularly for some sectors. And there's a lot of debate about whether there is in fact a labor shortage or whether there's just a disconnect between employers and the people looking for work. But we do know that it's an ongoing concern in terms of folks getting the people that they need, the people with the skills, and retaining those people in the jobs that they have. So that's an ongoing concern. One, in Alberta, our economy is kind of, it's a difficult one to pin down because it moves quickly, it changes a lot. And so I think the labor issue is one that we'll be talking about for some time still. And it is connected to this issue of tapping into, we can talk about tapping into diverse markets, but we can also talk about tapping into diverse labor pools, right? And how do we look at how we hire, recruit people, get the best people for the job, but in times of labor shortage, how do we access maybe sources of labor that we didn't think were there originally?
Now, can you speak a little bit to how the whole temporary foreign worker thing? Some would say that that's a solution to the labor shortage, but I know that you have a different perspective on it.
Well, it's a temporary solution, right? And the labor challenge isn't going away, I don't think, in the near future. So we really have to look both nationally and provincially and in our local communities about a few things. So first of all, we have to decide what our immigration system is for. Is it a nation-building process? Is it about building community? Is it about supporting our social systems and economic systems in the long term? Or is it just to fill short-term challenges? And I mean, our organization, the communities that we work with, the businesses, the organizations that we work with, we really try to push those long-term solutions to whatever challenge they have. So temporary foreign workers, they're great in the short term. And actually, we're seeing now that there's even some challenges in that kind of way of thinking. So
you bring in a bunch of temporary foreign workers, but your workplace isn't set up for diversity and inclusiveness.
Yeah.
Would there not be?
Well, and that's what we're seeing with this, the hiatus in terms of businesses in the food services sector. Not the federal government sort of closed the program indefinitely, and there's been some claims of mistreatment and concerns about Canadians not being able to access jobs. So there's a lot of challenges right now. That's not to say there isn't maybe a place for some role in the temporary. For some role for temporary foreign workers. It's been a program that's been around for a very long time, but we've never seen it to this level. So I would encourage, I guess it would be government that ultimately makes the decision, but even businesses play a big role, is to think about how we can create more long-term solutions in terms of the labor market. And there's a lot of people here right now who are looking for work and want to engage in that employment. So it's really about a different way of thinking about that system, I think, which is challenging because we don't tend to think in the long term. And it is difficult for businesses to think that way because you kind of have the next quarter and the next quarter and to think 5, 6, 10 years into advance is challenging. So I recognize those challenges, but we would like to see maybe a shift towards not preventing people from coming here to work, but let's look at how people can come here more permanently. And if we need those skills or that labor, then let's build that into the society as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of skills, I think it would be easy to go to that stereotypical place in your mind where you think, oh, immigrant labor, that's unskilled, that's entry level, but this is not truly the case, am I right?
No, most people who immigrate to Canada come through what is called the economic class, and they are usually skilled in some way. And so the challenge is, there is those perceptions of and stereotypes and assumptions about immigrant communities, newcomer communities. But the reality is most people that are coming do have a good skill set. And even some temporary foreign workers are brought in highly skilled. So there is maybe a difference from reality and what people's perceptions are of newcomer populations and communities.
But they often end up doing those entry-level jobs, right?
Yeah, so then there is a gap between experience and ability to obtain employment, in the sense that many people come with a lot of experience, maybe not Canadian experience, and come with a lot of training as well, so education or professional designations. But then, of course, there's a lot of barriers once you arrive. There is often a challenge in terms of employers recognizing non-Canadian experience, and even in Ontario, the Ontario Human Rights Commission has said this is grounds for discrimination, and so there's a shift that's happening there. But I think in speaking to newcomer communities and folks who are looking for employment with those kind of more professional designations, they do express that not having that Canadian experience can be a real barrier to employment right at the initial phases. And then, of course, there's qualifications and the regulatory bodies, and you should be, tested and make sure that you're able to do the job that you're doing and to Canadian standards. But all of these things kind of add up for a lot of people. And if you're immigrating, making a new home in a new country, you have to hit the ground running. I mean, you may have children, you may have a family. You may need to take a survival job in the short term, okay? And then you start applying for work, and it shows that you've been working at, a fast food outlet or something that's totally unrelated to the job you're applying for, because that's what you did to get your feet on the ground for a couple of years. And so that then maybe reflects poorly on the applicant and doesn't really speak to their ability to do the job at hand, but rather the challenges that come with immigrating to a new country and stabilizing your home and your family and making a little bit of money to survive.
So moving away from the labor scarcity element, there's also once folks are in the workplace, there can be risks to productivity and good results inherent in this whole diversity inclusiveness thing when it's not done well.
Yeah, so I mean, you have a few things. Any organization that doesn't think about how it works with its people, treats its people, how it creates an organizational culture that is healthy, inclusive, they're going to have lower productivity. They're going to have lower retention. They're going to have higher turnover, those kind of things.
Sure.
So all employers know that they have to create a healthy workplace, just to start off with.
Yeah.
But in particular, when we look at, let's say, immigrant communities, we also have to create a space where they feel included and welcomed, and whereby we're tapping into the diversity of knowledge and skills in the best way and most effective and efficient way possible. And a lot of workplaces aren't set up to create the most efficiency in terms of accessing everybody's skills and talent. And that's been an ongoing challenge for a lot of businesses and organizations, and one that we try to help with in terms of looking at how you can do your work better, whether it's in the public sector or whether it's in the private sector, by accessing all of that talent in the most effective and efficient and inclusive manner.
That makes something off script. Sorry, I go off script every single time. We know this. What about if you do that? If you know you have a diverse workplace and you go out of your way to make the immigrant or I'm not sure how to put it, but the people from different cultures feel more welcome and included. Can there, and I feel like I've seen this in my past work experiences, can there be a backlash then from the non-diverse workforce saying, oh, you're treating them special, you're going to all this effort? Like I've seen this in, especially I would say in blue collar environments.
Sure. Well, first thing first, all workplaces are diverse. So diversity encapsulates all aspects of identity, right? So we can have diversity even in seemingly non-diverse spaces. Let's say an organization that's predominantly white and male, I mean, there's still diversity there. There's different people are born in different places. You might have age diversity. So diversity is always there. So there is always a value in creating and trying to create more inclusive spaces. When we talk about, let's say, racial diversity or gender diversity or any other the aspects of identity that often jump out at us in the workplace, there can be that backlash. I mean, if you do it incorrectly, and historically that is something that has often happened in training and organizational change, is that the process isn't engaged with in an effective manner. It's sometimes it's reactive, so something will happen. There'll be harassment in the workplace. An investigation happens. Somebody is found to have said a joke or committed an act that is discriminatory or harassing in nature, and that process should be followed, and there should be sort of corrective action taken. But then we do training or something right away. We do the diversity training, right?
Yes.
And everybody rolls their eyes and goes, oh, okay, we have to do diversity training. There is value to training. We do a lot of it with a lot of different organizations. But I think looking at your organization and your organizational culture more broadly, and being proactive about saying, look, creating inclusive spaces, creating welcoming spaces, engaging with our employees at all levels of the organization and talking about what they feel is an inclusive space and how can they do their job better in a more effective way, you might head off some of those incidental situations. They're going to happen anyways, and so training can be a part of that, but we really encourage people, much like when we talk about the immigration system, let's look at this systematically, let's look at it long term, let's look at how we're going to create an organizational culture where inclusion, diversity are not only accepted and tolerated, but are in fact encouraged, and we see the benefits of those, creating those spaces for all employees. I mean, when you create inclusivity for workers who are immigrants or newcomers, or for women, or for anyone, people with disabilities, First Nations, Métis, Inuit folks, you're creating an inclusive space that impacts all employees, and it creates a better working environment for everyone. So you have to have those conversations, and you have to be prepared for a little bit of resistance, because these are challenging subjects. People are seeing these changes happen in their communities, and because we don't talk about it enough in an open and kind of non-confrontational way, sometimes people feel defensive. And so we have to accept that that'll happen, and make people feel safe to have those conversations and help them to realize that it isn't really about attacking any one group, but it's about creating an equitable, inclusive space for everyone.
Okay. We're going to come back to some nuts and bolts specifics about how to do that in a minute. But first, I just wanted to hear a little bit from you on, you said to me there's a demographic shift that's coming. Like this is something that is about to become an even more sort of burning topic. And, as much as it's always been important, I got the impression from you that it's on the verge of becoming even more so.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've been talking about for a while, but, if we look at population growth in Canada, we know that it's very low. So the people having babies who are already here in Canada is relatively low compared to the people that are passing away. So our population growth is limited. And in fact, I don't know the exact numbers, but a good majority of our population growth right now does come from immigration. And as we move through time, increasingly, I've looked at statistics that say by 2024, even more than 100% of our population growth, immigration as a share of population growth will be, way over 100%. So there'll be more.
Over 100%? I don't understand that.
Yeah. So it's the share of population growth. So if you look at how many people are passing away and how many people are having babies, to replenish, to increase our population, to have it growing, you'll need more people immigrating in than ever before. So it can be over 100% because it's a share of total
if
total
more
growth.
People are immigrating than are dying, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's lots of people not even having babies, right? So your population growth might be 0.6%, right? Which is actually declining, right?
It could be negative.
Yeah, so to have a steady kind of, even to maintain and have what you really want is sort of a slight incline, right? To maintain social services and things like that, improve quality of life. So then, yes, it would
have
be
a labor market.
Over 100% in terms of the proportion.
Okay.
But people who are statisticians probably would say that I'm completely wrong.
Yeah, if there are any statisticians out there, please stop tearing your hair out. We apologize.
Yeah. So that is a big shift that's coming, right? And one of the things, when we look at who is immigrating to Canada, we know it's not as it was pre-1970 when a lot of immigration reforms came in. It's people coming from mostly Asia and the Middle East, but as well as Central America, Latin America, Africa, the Caribbean. And these are folks who are coming with maybe different cultures, maybe different experiences, definitely different languages, and maybe visible minorities, or what we define in Canada as visible minorities, right? Somewhat problematic term, but folks who aren't white. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to create a different workforce, right? Different people with different experiences, different backgrounds. And so employers, communities, municipalities, organizations, citizens have to think differently about how we do business, who we're doing business for and with, and recognize that and be inclusive of those different perspectives. Doesn't mean completely doing everything differently or changing who we are, but it means accommodating some of those differences and thinking about it in a more comprehensive way. So that's the big shift that's coming, and it's really already here. I mean, you go into a school classroom, you go walk down the street, you go to a mall, you see that diversity there already. And we're having those conversations, whether it's about gender identity, sexual orientation is a huge conversation topic in the workplace, in school systems, in the public sector, in media, and likewise, racial identity, cultural identity, religious identity are big issues right now. I mean, look at in Quebec, that was a huge, the Charter of Values and the resistance to that. So the government right before the election wanted to put forward the Charter of Values, which required public service employees not to wear any religious garments while they're doing their duty. And there was
like no cross necklaces.
No crosses, no hijab, no, could even get into things like people not being able to wear a turban. So there was a lot of resistance to that, a lot of conversations and challenges to what that looked like. And I think we're going to be having a lot more of those conversations in the near future. So people who are ahead of that curve, who are appreciating the change before it's already in their organization, are going to see the benefits of that, whether it's more profit or whether it's getting to your communities in a more effective way, or being able to hire people and have them stay and work in your organization for longer. Yeah. And
fewer, it's at a more pedestrian level, fewer harassment claims, like those things suck up time and money and energy.
Yeah, a lot of energy, and they tend to create what might be, if you have a lot of those, it creates a toxic work environment, and then you're going to lose people anyway. So if you're never going to get rid of, you should always have a harassment policy, and you should always be well versed in how to manage that and deal with it when it happens, because it's not going to go away. But you can reduce the possibility of that happening by having an inclusive and diverse workplace where everybody feels welcomed. Shifting that organizational culture before you're almost forced to do it when an incident happens.
Yeah. So clearly there's you can avoid a lot of risk, you can capitalize on a lot of advantages by paying attention to this area. And you touched on this a little bit before, but the go-to is training, right? So we do training, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is sort of a knee-jerk reaction when these things happen, and it's not necessarily a bad one, and we always, for our organization, that's the bulk of what people bring us in to do. But we're always really excited when either proactively folks are looking at their systems, their policies, their practices, how they do business, and have a conversation about how they can do that in a more effective and inclusive way.
It was pretty intimidating to say, you have to have an inclusive culture from the ground. Like, what are some how do you start? How do you tackle this? Like, I can't just say, okay, everyone, go change your culture.
Yeah.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah, well, and one of the other challenges, in particularly large organizations, always seems that we're going through organizational change. Actually, that just seems to be the state of being now.
Yeah.
So there can be a lot of resistance to anything else that happens. So it's about it's about having some quick wins, making some small changes that'll give you results right away. But it's also it's about being authentic about it too. I mean, I think one of the big challenges is training can be seen as a little bit superficial, and so engaging with employees and with your customers or with the clients that you serve in an authentic way through community engagement or through those kind of things can reduce some of that resistance and give things the time that it needs to play out. But
so what kind of quick wins? You say
quick wins, yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about things like even in the hiring process and the recruitment and selection process, just ensuring that you have maybe an understanding of how bias operates in the recruitment process. For example, often a mistake that's made by recruiters is seeing like the non-English sounding name and associating that sometimes subconsciously with somebody who doesn't speak English effectively or can't communicate in the workplace or doesn't have the right experience. So they go into the B or the C pile. And so even telling your recruiters or yourself, if you're a smaller organization, keeping in mind that the name really doesn't tell you a lot about how that employee is going to perform, right? Those are little things that you can do that start to create that culture of inclusivity in your workplace that can be really helpful. Other things we've done with people is things like an event checklist, right? When we're hosting a company barbecue, keep in mind during certain months in the summer, folks might be celebrating Ramadan, right? And they can't go to a barbecue during while they're fasting. And so thinking about that, how do we create inclusivity for those folks who are working with us? Things like even stuff like keeping in mind that sometimes organizations have parties. There's alcohol always there. Some people don't drink alcohol. There's lots of folks across the cultural spectrum that might be an uncomfortable place. Doesn't mean never doing that, but it means do we also have gatherings where that isn't in place? And so thinking about that.
Is there something else interesting to drink? I'm not a big drinker, and I get tired of ginger ale. Holy smokes.
Yeah, or like having a punch or some sort of interesting juice, right?
Yeah.
So little
mocktails.
Things like that. Yeah, mocktails.
Mocktails, your key to diversity and inclusiveness.
We should have had mocktails here today.
Oh, such a good idea.
That would have been great.
Oh, wow.
But thinking about those things, those don't involve huge interventions and big. Doesn't take a lot of resources. Doesn't take a lot of time. You need a bit of maybe expertise or knowledge about finding that information, and sometimes that's where we help out. But ultimately, those are quick wins, right? And those start to shift that broader culture.
Mm-hmm. It's
right?
a little bit of a money where your mouth is kind of a thing, right?
Yeah. And so you don't have to make a wholesale change. You don't have to change. It's not changing your entire organizational identity, but it's really more about, are we being proactive about creating these steps so that people can participate fully in the life of the company or the organization.
Now, if you are, not to put the focus on training, because I know that that's the knee-jerk thing, but if you are going to do training, is there somewhere you should start? Like, should you maybe focus on your more senior people so that it filters down? Or is there...
It depends on your organization.
Budgets being limited and everything.
It depends on your organization. So some organizations, it makes complete sense to start with leadership. So I would say more where you have higher structure, more hierarchy, where there's a chain of command, so to speak. So you can think of law enforcement as an example of that. But even government, to a certain extent, there's a lot of value in having more senior people. If there's going to be training, engage in that so that they have that language and people see that leadership's doing that. Now, if you're a more flat organization in terms of leadership, I mean, then it probably makes sense to have a mix, right? If the training is around sort of operational needs in terms of servicing diverse communities, then frontline might make more sense. It really depends what you're training.
It's hiring practices than HR.
Yeah, absolutely. So it could depend. So you might have level of organization, you might have role in organization. You might be thinking about that. Some people that we've worked with, we do kind of a train the trainer. So we're training people who do training or who do development. We give them tips for incorporating in their role diversity and inclusion and cultural competency, or senior leaders, right, who want to have that language, want to move this organizational change forward. So give them the skills so that within their organization they can do it. Because sometimes there's value in having somebody up from the outside train everybody exclusively, but there's also a lot of some might say there's bigger value in creating that capacity internally so that it becomes just part of the way of doing business. And we really like to see that. So yeah, it depends on who it is and what it's for and why you're doing it. And any good educator should really ask those questions beforehand and say, okay, well, why do you want to do this? And who's the best people to be in the room? And how can we run this out in a way that's most effective for everybody? So it's a good question, though. I like it when people ask me that, who should be in the room? How should we do this? So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So is this, clearly this applies to big organizations with like a discrete HR function and multiple layers of leadership or whatever, but what about a small enterprise? What about a 5 or 6 person shop? What about, how does this apply if you're just little?
Yeah, well, we talked about that, and it's interesting because in some ways it could be harder because you might be in the day-to-day business and you're really focused on the short term, and you might not have time to sort of stop and think about, okay, let's talk about diversity and inclusion, or you might even not think it's a priority because you have such a small staff. But like I said before, no matter who your staff consists of or who your organization consists of, there's value in doing this work, and you'll see benefits to it. And in some cases, it might be easier to do because you are involved in the day-to-day. You're right there on the ground. You have a lot more interaction with all of your people. So you can make those changes as part of your own practice if you're doing it from a leadership perspective. It's about creating that culture, and smaller organizations will have a lot more buy-in if they're already doing okay in terms of their organizational culture and how people get along. When the leader says, hey, this is something that I think is really important, and we're going to move forward on this. So I think there's a lot of value even for small organizations to do this and think about it, because it doesn't really matter how big the group is. I mean, we want to create an inclusive space no matter what. And it might make you more efficient, more effective, more help you to do your business better, whatever that is. So I think there's value in smaller organizations doing it as well.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap up with that.
Great.
Thank you very much for being here today, Ian.
Thank you.
And we, of course, will be sending out a follow-up email with the link to Ian's organization if you would like to find out more about them. We're moving our studio. So this is normally where I would tell you what next month's topic is, but as a matter of fact, we won't be having a webcast next month. We will be releasing a video of an interview that I did at a conference with some permaculture experts. And permaculture is, it's a bit of a buzzword, but it's actually just a system of, if I can quote my guest, she said it is meeting our needs while considering sustainability. No, I think I said that wrong, but they'll explain it much better. So next month we'll be releasing that video for your enjoyment. And we thank you very much for having joined us today. I am Nadine Riopel here at the Center for Social Responsibility at the 3I International Institute for Innovation. I always trip on that. And thank you very much. Have a lovely day.